It was a warm, quiet afternoon in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people usually smiled politely to their neighbors, waved from their driveways, and pretended life was perfect behind perfectly trimmed hedges. But not everyone in this community cared about kindness or peace. Among them was a woman everyone secretly called Karen. Her real name didn't matter much. Her reputation for unnecessary drama and power-hungry demands spoke louder than any introduction ever could. Karen was the self-appointed watchdog of the Homeowners Association, a woman who believed the law gave her the authority to control every tiny detail of everyone's life. Whether it was the color of someone's mailbox, the length of their grass, or the kind of car parked in a driveway, Karen always had an opinion, and she wasn't shy about forcing it onto others. For months, Karen had been keeping a particularly close eye on one family that had recently moved in. The Johnsons were new to the neighborhood, a young black couple with warm smiles and a quiet confidence that seemed to bother Karen more than anything else. Marcus Johnson, tall and broad-shouldered, had the kind of calm presence that drew people in. His wife, Alicia, was radiant and kind, often seen walking their small front garden or greeting neighbors with a friendly wave. They were polite, private, and focused on building a peaceful life for themselves and their soon-to-arrive baby. But Karen wasn't interested in peace. From the day Marcus and Alicia moved in, she seemed determined to find reasons to bother them. First, it was a complaint about the shade of blue on their front door. Then it was the way their recycling bin was placed an inch too close to the curb. Marcus always remained calm, responding with a polite smile or a simple, "We'll take care of it." Alicia, heavily pregnant, tried to avoid confrontation altogether. But Karen's eyes were always watching, waiting for the next excuse. The day Alicia gave birth to their baby girl should have been one of pure joy. After hours of labor, Marcus held his tiny daughter for the first time, his heart swelling with a love deeper than anything he had ever known. They named her Grace, a name that felt like a prayer and a promise. For Marcus, Grace represented everything he had fought for in life: family, safety, and the chance to create a home filled with love. When Alicia and baby Grace finally came home from the hospital, Marcus did everything he could to make sure they were safe and comfortable. He carried his wife gently inside, set up soft blankets in the nursery, and kept a watchful eye on every sound outside their door. He knew the world could be unpredictable, but he was determined to shield his family from any harm. Unfortunately, Karen saw their return not as a moment to celebrate, but as an opportunity to interfere. From her window, she spotted Marcus helping Alicia out of the car with their newborn. Her eyes narrowed. In her mind, a new baby meant new rules to enforce, rules she believed she alone could decide. The next morning, Karen marched across the street and banged on the Johnsons' front door. Marcus, who had barely slept, opened it cautiously, holding baby Grace in his arms. Karen didn't even greet him. Instead, she launched straight into one of her infamous "wah" tirades. "Marcus," she snapped, her eyes darting to the baby in his arms, "I need to see your WA paperwork for the new edition." Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "Excuse me." "The baby," Karen said sharply. "Any new residents must be registered with the association. It's standard policy. I'll need her birth certificate, vaccination records, and proof that she's allowed to live here. And," she added, lowering her voice with a smug smile, "I'll need to inspect her to confirm." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. Alicia, who had come to the door holding a blanket, gasped audibly. "You want to inspect our baby?" she asked, her voice trembling. Karen crossed her arms. "Rules are rules. If you don't comply, I'll be forced to file an official complaint. The WA takes these things very seriously." For a moment, there was complete silence. Marcus's jaw tightened. He could feel a familiar heat rising in his chest, the same controlled, razor-sharp focus he had felt in far more dangerous situations. Because what Karen didn't know, what no one in this quiet suburban neighborhood knew, was that Marcus Johnson was no ordinary man. Before settling into civilian life, Marcus had spent over a decade serving as a Navy SEAL. He had survived missions in hostile territories, protected lives under impossible odds, and learned to stay calm when everything around him was chaos. He had faced real threats, real danger, and this woman at his door, demanding to inspect his newborn daughter, was not going to intimidate him. Marcus took a slow step forward, his broad frame filling the doorway. "Karen," he said evenly, his voice low but commanding, there is no HOA policy that gives you the right to demand access to my child. This conversation is over. Karen blinked, startled by the sudden change in his tone. For a moment, she opened her mouth to argue, but something in Marcus's eyes made her hesitate. There was a quiet authority there, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. Still, Karen wasn't the type to back down easily. I'll be back, she snapped, spinning on her heel. You'll regret this. As she stormed away, Marcus shut the door gently but firmly. He turned to Alicia, who was holding Grace tightly against her chest, her face pale with shock. Marcus reached out and touched her arm reassuringly. She's not going to get anywhere, he said softly. I promise you. But Karen was far from finished. Over the next few days, she launched a campaign of harassment. She left threatening notes in their mailbox, claiming fines would be issued if they didn't provide proper documentation for their baby. She called late at night, leaving voicemails accusing them of violating community standards. She even attempted to peer through their windows under the guise of a routine neighborhood check. Marcus documented everything, every note, every voicemail, every unwanted visit, he recorded it all. He also began quietly reaching out to neighbors, explaining what was happening. To his surprise, many of them shared similar stories. Karen had harassed other families too, fines for minor landscaping issues, demands for personal information, and baseless threats of legal action. Most people had complied out of fear. But Marcus was not most people. One afternoon, Karen returned for what she clearly believed would be her final showdown. She arrived with a clipboard in hand and an arrogant smirk plastered across her face. This time, Marcus met her outside. Standing tall in the bright sunlight, he greeted her with a calm nod. Karen, he said, his voice carrying the quiet strength of a man who had faced far greater challenges. Before you say anything, I want you to know that I've spoken to the HOA board, several neighbors, and my attorney. There is no policy requiring registration of a newborn. Your demands are baseless, and your repeated harassment is a violation of privacy laws. Karen's smirk faltered. I was just following procedure, she stammered. No, Marcus said firmly. You were abusing your position to intimidate my family. That ends today. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but Marcus took a slow step closer. I've given you every opportunity to stop. If you set foot on my property again or contact my wife, I will involve law enforcement. And trust me, his eyes narrowed slightly, I know exactly how to handle a threat. In that moment, something shifted. Karen, for the first time, seemed to realize she was dealing with someone she could not control. The false confidence drained from her face. She mumbled something about a misunderstanding, and hurried back across the street. From that day forward, Karen's harassment stopped. She no longer patrolled the neighborhood with her clipboard, no longer banged on doors demanding compliance with imaginary rules. Word spread quickly about what had happened, and neighbors who had once been silent began to stand up for themselves too. Marcus and Alicia had not only protected their family, they had inspired others to reclaim their peace. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus sat on the porch holding baby Grace in his arms. Alicia joined him, resting her head against his shoulder. The air was quiet again, the kind of peaceful silence they had dreamed of when they first moved in. You handled that perfectly, Alicia whispered. Marcus smiled, kissing the top of his daughter's head. No one threatens my family, he said softly. Not now, not ever. In the end, Karen had no idea that the man she tried to intimidate was a trained Navy SEAL, a man who had faced life and death situations and come out stronger. To her, he was just another neighbor she could bully. But Marcus proved what true strength really looks like. It isn't about shouting or intimidation. It's about standing firm, protecting what matters, and refusing to let fear dictate your life. And as Marcus looked down at his sleeping daughter, he knew one thing for certain. Grace would grow up in a home where love was stronger than fear, and where no HOA Karen could ever steal their peace again.